Welcome to the Be Bold podcast. I'm Beth Whitman. Thanks for joining me today. The Be Bold podcast is where I feature conversations with women who have inspirational stories to share. These are women from a wide range of backgrounds who are forging their own paths to success. The one thread they have in common is that they are bold in what they do. They follow what they love and somehow have created a lifestyle that supports it. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play and leave a review. And that literally just takes a couple of minutes. Those reviews are critical to building our Be Bold community. You're in for a real treat today with this conversation. I'm speaking with Mica Chavez, also known as Michelle, also known as Chef Michelle, and it just depends on how you know her and for how long you've known her. Many of the women who've been on one of my Santa Fe culinary tours knows Chef Michelle from the Santa Fe School of Cooking, where she often teaches our tamale making class. Mica has a pretty big personality, and if you've met her, you know that already. But she's also got a big smile and a big laugh and just really this amazing aura, and you can't help but just feel lifted up in her presence. If you ever have a chance to take a cooking class with her, you'll see what I mean. The experience will stick with you for a long time, and really, it's not about the tamales, it's about Chef Michelle. You'll even hear it in her voice here. As I went through her Facebook page looking for photos I could use for this podcast, I had a really difficult time finding ones where she wasn't surrounded by other people. I know it's true that we do put our best face forward on social media, but going through her photos made me realize that Mica is all about others. It's not about herself. In our conversation, she's pretty honest when talking about her dark times and also how she finally got herself into recovery for drinking. But we start with her early years working in restaurants and how those were not the healthiest of experiences for her, but also how she made a transition into sobriety after moving from Texas to Santa Fe, where the lifestyle was so different in a very good way than what she had been used to back in Texas. We talk about how gratitude plays a big part in her life and how she approaches every day with gratitude. And we also talk about how she jumped in, not completely qualified to teach 7th graders. And not only was she teaching them, but she was teaching them in Spanish. And that is not her first language. At 48 and a half, she believes there's so much more ahead of her than is behind her. And I just thought that was such a gem of a thought, just really wonderful. Wow, there were really so many words of wisdom in this episode, and you'll just need to hear it for yourself. I really hope you enjoy listening to Mica Chavez. I'm here in Santa Fe with Mica.
Hello.
And she is with the Santa Fe School of Cooking, and I've known her for years. We come down here and we do an incredible tamale making class, which everybody loves. It's always just delicious, and it's a lot of fun. And what I want to do today is kind of start with where you are now, what you're up to in your life, and then we're going to go back a little bit and we're going to hear some pretty fascinating kind of a storyline of how you made your way to Santa Fe, where you came from, and I think there's going to be little inspirational nuggets in here, so I'm looking forward to it. So first, tell us, I mentioned that you're at the School of Cooking, but elaborate on that a little bit and tell me more about what you do.
So here in Santa Fe, I am one of the chefs on the staff at the Santa Fe School of Cooking, which specializes in, but isn't limited to, Southwestern cooking classes. I also own a catering company with my wife, Coriander Catering, and I just finished my first year as a bilingual New Mexico history 7th grade teacher.
That sounds like fun.
Not so much. So 12, 13, 14 is a hard age. And
I know I don't have kids, but I know from my own experience, I wouldn't want to have taught me.
So it was interesting. Whether or not K through 12 education is going to be my new career, I don't know. I haven't decided yet. I have a couple more months, I guess, to think about it and see if that's the direction I want to go. But the thing with Santa Fe is if you sort of open doors and let doors open for you, you find yourself heading down paths and doing things that you never thought you might be doing. And that's sort of the beauty and the different thing about living in the city different is it's really, this is one of the most networky places I've ever been. And if you know one person and then that person knows another person and so on, different doors will open. And that has certainly been my experience here.
Do you think that that's unique to Santa Fe? And do you think it's because it sounds like you kind of tied that right into networking and kind of small community. Do you think it's for that reason, or do you think there's something else that's kind of, it's a little bit magical here, that doors open and things appear?
There's definitely magic here. That I think is indisputable. But it is a small town. We only have 79,000 full-time residents. So if you're involved in any of the major circles, like catering, I worked at the community college here for years, worked for many different catering companies. You know people in lots of different circles that do lots of different things. And because so many people here have multiple jobs in multiple arenas, it just opens different doors. I think that's probably what it's all about. But yeah, there's definitely something different about Santa Fe.
Can you identify it?
You know what? No, I can't. And it's one of those things where the longer you're here, the more you appreciate it. And people come here to kind of find themselves, whether they know it or not at the time. And I see that a lot too. But
people moving here, you
mean?
Mm-hmm.
You either get it or there was this lady at the Santa Fe School of Cooking. Then she looked at me. She goes, "Well, honey, convince me to move here." I'm like, "Nope." No,
because
sorry.
If you need to be convinced,
you don't get it.
It's not for you.
Right. So that's certainly the magic of being here. And this is such an ancient place and such a special place. And there have been so many layers of human migration that have left an indelible imprint upon us that I think living with that kind of history every day just makes it that kind of special.
What brought you here in the first place?
Oh boy. Well, I'm originally from El Paso. My family lived in Gallup when I was young, and so I spent the first 6 years of my life in Gallup.
New Mexico.
In New Mexico, which is in the western part of the state. And then we moved back to Texas and then to Northern California, and I spent 18 years in Northern California. That's where I started in restaurants at the age of 14 washing dishes. In 96, my maternal grandmother got really sick, so I moved back to El Paso to take care of her. And then in 2003, she passed away, and I moved up here. I could get myself here on the weekend, so I ran a restaurant Monday through Friday.
How old were you then?
Oh, let me see. It was 13, almost 14 years ago, 34. So I would work Monday through Friday there, get in the car, drive up here on Friday afternoon, work for a caterer Saturday, Sunday, and then get in the car on Monday morning and drive back to El Paso and work Monday night, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So it was a way to be able to sort of establish myself here while keeping one foot in El Paso, where I was still employed and had a house and a job and was able to make money. But I knew that Santa Fe was a food city. And I knew that if it was any place I was going to make it, it was going to be here. And something was pulling me here.
And you had always been interested in food.
Yeah.
What was the draw?
When I got my first job in kitchens, I was washing dishes, and I liked that it was creative. And then from that dishwashing job, I went to better and better restaurants, and I was always the only girl. And I was always the only girl on my soccer team when I was little. There weren't co-ed teams. If you wanted to play, you played with the boys. Mm-hmm. And you begged and pleaded and let until the boys finally broke down enough to give you a chance to play. At least that was my experience.
And did you have such a passion about soccer that you just said, I've got to play. I don't care if I'm the oddball and
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only girl on the team. Your heart was so into it that you knew you had to do that.
I wanted to play, and nobody was going to tell me no. And whether it was soccer or softball or whatever we were playing at the time, I was going to play. I was not going to be told no.
Where did that come from, that determination?
I don't know. No idea. I was not going to be told no, that I could not do something. And so when I started working in kitchens, it was that same kind of thing. I got a lot of backward corner of the eye kind of, what are you doing here? And I'm like, I'm not going to be told no. You are not going to tell me no. I actually had a guy one time when I was like early on in the early kitchen days, I had this guy tell me that I was taking a job away from a good man. And I looked at him and I said, well, if you can find one, he can have it. And that was sort of it. That was my career. And that was the beginning. And that it was so competitive and so creative. And it was physical and hot and sweaty. And I loved it.
In the kitchen.
In the kitchen. Yeah, I loved it. There was no turning back. Once I got once I started understanding the rhythm and the flow, and that you didn't necessarily have to have an education, I rose through the ranks pretty fast. Just was not going to take no for an answer.
Did you ever go to culinary school?
Yeah, I did at 35.
Okay. Oh, right.
So I had 20 some odd years of running kitchens and all over the San Francisco Bay Area, El Paso. Got international press out of that. Established a reputation for myself. Was on the
As a chef.
And lots of other things too, I'm sure. But I had a weekly segment on I think it was the ABC affiliate down there.
A TV program?
Yeah, doing cooking segments.
Okay.
And was just I was having a lot of fun. But I was also really beginning to get very unhealthy. There are lots of things that you can do in the restaurant business that turn out to not be so good for you. And every day was a party, and I just got sucked into partying and going out and drinking.
It's probably a lot of late nights. And
and there's always beer. Mm-hmm. There's always tequila. There's always something. You can trade burgers for beers with the bartender. I mean, if you wanted it, it was there. And I fell into a pretty dark hole of drinking and not taking very good care of myself. And went to the doctor for a physical, and the doctor looked at me at 252 pounds and said, if you don't make some changes, you're going to die.
How old were you then?
34, 35.
Uh-huh. And how did you respond to that?
I was actually on some level probably okay with that. It had just gotten so bad, and I was in such a funk. And on one level, I was having a lot of success. And in 2003, I was the chef de cuisine for the PGA Champions Dinner in New York. And, I was getting, on one hand, everything was taking off. And on the other hand, everything was falling apart.
Did you feel like you were self-sabotaging?
Oh, completely. Not being very subtle about it. And so I knew I had to get out of El Paso because there were too many ghosts. There was too many stuff. There was just too much. And so I moved up here, realized how far down I'd gotten, and that this just was not a tenable way to live any longer.
How did you come to, sorry to keep interrupting, but I'm really
okay.
fascinated by the story. I think it's great. How did you realize that something needed to change? You came to Santa Fe, and then...
My behavior just wasn't normal. And it was apparent when I had changed my social group how skewed I had become.
You changed your social group from the earlier times that you were in Santa Fe?
No, when I was in El Paso,
okay.
Moving up here. So when I was hanging out down in El Paso with my restaurant friends, it was that kind of behavior was okay. But then when I moved up here and it was a little older, a little more educated, a little more sophisticated group, once again, I was getting the looks out of the corner of the eye and what are you doing here and why are you behaving like that? And it just wasn't okay. It was not acceptable.
And it wasn't because you were the only girl.
No,
it was because you had you had habits that you
were. And so finally I got to a point where I didn't want to be sick and tired anymore. I'm tired of feeling like this. I'm tired of being depressed. I'm tired of feeling like the sun never comes out.
It's so hard to imagine because when you walk into a room, you are the light.
Oh, geez.
I mean, I know it sounds really goofy, but I will just tell you. The other day when I walked into the Santa Fe School of Cooking, you hadn't been our tamale making chef for a couple of years, so I hadn't seen you, and I thought, well, maybe she's not working there anymore, and I stopped asking to have you as our chef, right?
Because I'd been in Italy.
Right, yeah. And poor girl.
I know, right?
So I walked in and there you were. And I was so happy to see you, So it's just like, and, all the women on my tours, they're just like, oh my God, Chef Michelle, she's so awesome, just great. You just bring a presence about you.
Thank you.
And it's really hard for me to imagine that there was a time when you talk about depression or you talk about being so unhealthy that you knew that you had to make a change because this is the only way that I know you.
It got really bad. Suicidal is not a far stretch. And so I finally realized, look, it's either get busy. There's a line from the movie Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying. It's like, okay, what do you want here? And what do you want your life to look like in 10 years, in 5 years, in 10 years? And what's your ultimate goal? And so I went to the College of Santa Fe, and I was tired of being in kitchens, and I knew I just couldn't make the money that I needed to make. So I was going to go to school and make documentaries. I talked to an advisor there, and she said, the community college has a culinary program. So this was right about the time that I got sober. I quit drinking and actually quit smoking, and that was the hardest thing. Oh, my God. I was like a pack-a-day smoker, which is so foreign to me now. I started going to the community college, and I realized they had a culinary program. Wow, I can get through this culinary program, and I didn't have any sort of official accreditation. I just had 25 years of experience. So I went in and I applied and I was accepted, and it was open enrollment. I didn't know it at the time. I was so happy that I got accepted to a college. I'm like, wow, they want me. So I went and enrolled, and here I am, 35, sitting in a classroom full of 18-year-olds, and feeling pretty out of place.
This was after you got sober.
This was right about this is all happening right about the same time. And
so nothing like diving in and taking it all on.
If you're going to do it, just do it. Mm-hmm. There's no half measures. You just got to go. And I had to approach my new life the way that I had approached my old life, which was with everything I had. There was nothing stupid I wouldn't do.
But in a good way, it sounds like.
Well, no, back when I was drinking, there was nothing stupid I wouldn't do. Mm-hmm. So now I had to take that and turn it around and say, okay, so what am I going to do that's not stupid today, and how willing am I to dedicate myself to this? And my answer was absolutely. I just have to do this, because if I don't, this is the alternative.
Did you have a support system, family, friends, that kind of thing, or were you pretty much on your own trying to figure it out?
I didn't want my family to worry. And I don't know if they knew how bad things had gotten, because they're still back in California. I knew that they knew it was bad. That part I couldn't hide. But I don't know if they knew how bad it got. And I didn't want to reach out and scare them. They're in California. I know my parents and my sister would do anything for me. That's not a question. I just didn't want to let them know how bad things had gotten, because I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. I'm a big girl. I should be able to control myself, and I can't. I mean, addiction for some people is like a switch gets turned on and there's no turning it off.
Well, that's what addiction is all about. And whether it's food or drink or
whatever.
Yes,
you can hurt yourself with a variety of things. It doesn't have to be the obvious vices. So trying to learn how to reread at 35, because it's something about my brain just got rewired. And trying to learn to read, and I mean, I could recognize the letters, but I had zero ability to comprehend or to retain information. And so I felt like I was starting all over again from nothing. But here I am, 35, with bills and, baggage and all of this other stuff. And I'm sitting in a room full of kids who are 18, texting on their phones. I'm like, oh, God. But I did it. And I graduated with a 3.5 GPA. And I went on to get my bachelor's. And it took me 11 years, but that's a whole nother story.
But you felt like you needed to go back and get some sort of a degree.
Yeah. And because while I was getting the degree, the man who was running the department hired me. So I was getting a degree while I was figuring out how to do a new career, while I was figuring out how to do a whole new life. It was one of the scariest things I've ever done, but it was also very exciting.
What was scary about it?
Reinventing yourself. And the most exciting thing was reinventing yourself. I mean, oh my God, what happens if I succeed? Failing, that was easy. I knew what to do with that. But what am I going to do if I succeed? And once again,
Did you actually have those thoughts, or is it only in retrospect that you can look back and say, yeah, it is kind of scary to think that what if I am successful? What if I do get my dream job? Or was it more kind of the subtle self-sabotaging or self-doubt that you were going through?
It was remnants of that. And I think I was so busy and so there's a saying when you first get into recovery and you stop drinking that you're kind of living in a pink cloud. I was so excited and so nervous and so scared of everything. This friend of mine compared me to a naked chihuahua in a snowstorm. But I just kept plowing through. I mean, Once again, I was not going to be told no. And there's something about being in sports and being competitive and just having the mentality that you're not going to tell me no. And I'm just going to keep pushing. I'm going to be the little train that could. And I'm going to reinvent this thing, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this to the best of my ability, and it's going to be ugly, and it's going to be painful, and it's going to be scary, and I'm going to have fits, and I'm going to cry, but it's not permanent. This is going to change. If I keep moving forward, something will change.
Do you still tell yourself that every day? Like you have to wake up every day?
Every day.
What's it going to be today?
Well, if I don't make a conscious choice to live a conscious life, then you become somewhat unconscious, and there you are sitting in your chair waiting to die. And that's just not okay. That's not okay. I just came back from visiting my 96-year-old grandmother, and she has all her marbles. She's got a sense of humor. She's very much with it. She still drives. I mean, she's not dead. Why should I be dead?
It's my observation that there are a lot of people who are sitting around, maybe not waiting to die, but certainly not inspired by life and not inspired enough to, and certainly, I'm guilty of this too. I'm not inspired enough to get up off the couch and, turn off the TV and read a book instead of watching TV and eating my bowl of popcorn, which I certainly enjoy. But I think that has become a habit for we are anesthetized. We are a society that is anesthetized by social media, by TV, by drugs, by prescription medication, by food, by alcohol, by cigarettes, by whatever, whatever it is. What would you say to somebody trying to find their way? Like, you seem very motivated, like somehow you found the motivation to get up off the couch. Where did you find that motivation?
Well, first it was desperation, and then it became gratitude, because I've been to places and I've seen what absolute poverty looks like. And as a kid, I remember we were in El Paso and I was just being a real butt. I was little and I was crying because I didn't get the bike I wanted for Christmas, and I was just being a real jerk. Mm-hmm. And my mom, we were going over to Juarez that day to go shop and to go eat. And that was like a big deal. But it was Christmas time. It was cold. There was snow on the ground. And I remember we were driving around and, there's kids with like snotty noses and juggling oranges and wiping windows and trying to make money on the street corners like you do in an impoverished place. And my mom kept saying, what do you think they got? What do you think they got for Christmas? What do you think they got? And she's not like this, but she drove home a point. And as soon as I was completely just, okay, all right, she looked at me, she goes, your grandpa used to say, I cried because I had no shoes until I saw a man who had no feet. And I think that's actually a quote from Truman or one of the presidents, but in my mind, it came from my grandfather. And I've taken that little adage and I've applied it to every aspect of my life. If I want something good to happen, I've got to do something good. If I want things to come to me, I have to first manifest them in my mind. What does this look like? What do I want this to look like? 5 years from now, what do I want this experience to be? And just gratitude. I have the ability to stand up and walk. I'm self-mobile. I can think. I can make a living. I have money. Nobody's coming. The police aren't coming to my house today. Hopefully. Mm-hmm. It's still early, but we have a pretty good shot.
Yeah, well, just stay here.
Yeah, they don't know where I am.
I'll keep you hidden.
But there are so many that have so little. And I think we get placated by having so much and being so comfortable that we forget. And the world is a big, beautiful place. And last year I took my stepkids to Italy, and because I want them, and hopefully next year we're going to go to Germany to the family farm, which is about 60 miles east of Nuremberg. I want them to know that this world is big, but they have a place in it. And we are more alike than we are different. And their generation is the generation that is the next up and coming, and we need them. And we need them to have a greater understanding, because we're not doing so good of a job of it, in my opinion. But I think at this point now, my motivation comes from gratitude that I've taken the steps necessary to educate myself, that I've had the opportunities to educate myself.
Your initial change and kind of transition came from a place of pain, would you say?
Yeah.
Like with the doctor telling you that you really needed
You're gonna
to
die.
make a change.
And to have a doctor with that level of concern in his eyes told me that he wasn't just saying this to say this. This was a real deal.
Was this in El Paso?
Mm-hmm.
And how long from the time that he told you that to when you actually made the change? How much time passed?
It took me about 1.5 years to hit my target weight. And and that wasn't just a weight issue. That was shedding a lot of the emotional baggage that came along with it. I mean, you're trying to fill a hole with something. And it's an internal hole that you're trying to fill with external things. And the one thing that I've been able to take away from this whole experience is it's an inside job. Mm-hmm. You got to get out of your head and into your heart and just go and be outside. And, we're not supposed to be sedentary creatures. So one of my favorite things to do in the morning is I compost, and I plant a big garden every year. And I love going out and watching, and even the stuff I don't plant, as soon as I start watering, squash comes up everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I just like walking around the garden with a cup of coffee. Plant stuff. Watch it come up. To plant a seed is to have hope, because you're putting all this energy into it, and you're watering it, and you're taking care of it, and you get all excited when you see it begin to break the ground. And I think that's a metaphor for a lot more than just a garden. I mean, tending a garden is much like tending yourself. And, when I hear people come to the Santa Fe School of Cooking and they say things like, oh, I don't like to cook. I don't cook. I'm thinking, what's wrong with you?
But then they also have a great time doing
cooking.
It. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But, what is it about this that you don't want to do to take care of yourself? Because it's self-nurturing and it's self-care. And at least that's what food is to me. It all wraps up into, for me, into food and gardening and growing and raising and nurturing things, including yourself. And that's to me, that's the crux of it. Because coming from a place where I was, literally thinking, okay, I can wrap the rope around that and I can step off the table and that be it, to, I have more possibilities than I know what to do with. And it's happened in a period of 13 years. That's how fast this took. That was the progression.
Your depression and the suicidal thoughts, was that, and I apologize if I'm missing the timeline, was that here in Santa Fe?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's when I first moved up here.
So you moved from El Paso to here, and then you probably had, what it sounds like to me is that you realized you were in a true transition where you're like, okay, well, I'm not with my people in El Paso being crazy, and I'm not really a good fit yet with these people in Santa Fe because they are living this different lifestyle. So you were probably thinking, what the hell am I? Like, where am I?
Yeah.
What is this all about?
Where do I fit?
Yeah.
How do I fit? And here I am feeling like a misfit because I'm not the only I'm the only girl on the team. So all of those feelings too. And the more I've traveled and the more I've found myself in situations where people maybe on the surface all look different, but really we all want the same things: acceptance and wisdom and love and understanding. And I think that's the universal. Mm-hmm. And if you have kids in your life, you want your kids to do better than you did. And that to me, I had this unfounded fear of traveling and finding myself not being able to communicate. And I've gone to places where they don't speak any of the languages that I'm fortunate enough to speak, and I've still found a way to get around. Mm-hmm. Charades, drawing pictures, pointing, laughing, whatever. I found a way. And, it's like every time you figure out something new that scared you, it's a new sense of freedom. Oh my God, this is a new change. This is a change. This is scary. Okay, I made the change. It's not so scary. So maybe I can do a little bit more.
Well, it's like a new baseline.
Yeah.
You just have a new baseline. And especially when you travel to, what I found or have found over the years, is that you travel, you get challenged, and then you run into obstacles, you get through the obstacle, and you come back, and then you realize that you can implement mm-hmm. that. You come back a stronger person as a result of that.
You can take that experience and you can build upon it. And with every step, it's given me a new sense of confidence and a new sense of identity and a new sense of freedom that, I can do this. I can tackle this. I taught New Mexico history to 7th graders in Spanish, and I'm not fluent. I did it.
This is what you just did?
This is what I just did.
Oh, you were actually teaching in Spanish.
Yes.
Too.
Just hand me unicycles and chainsaws, and
and that's your next challenge, yeah.
It was crazy. Yeah. I mean, when I applied to the public schools, there was a place that you could fill out whether or not you're bilingual, and I check yes. I've spent 35 years in kitchens. I'm contextually, conversationally okay. But to that level of academic vocabulary, no, not so much. And I was very honest about that. And they're like, okay, well, we're just going to see what happens.
Were they, no offense, but were they just really desperate for teachers?
Probably.
Or they just saw something in you and thought, okay.
No, I think they were desperate.
Okay.
That's how it started anyway. Yeah. So I told the principal that I just kind of wanted to meet the kids. I wasn't expecting to stay the whole day and teach. So they put me in front of my first class, which was about 15 kids from ages 11 to 13, 7th grade, and handed me a textbook in Spanish and left.
And there you are.
And there I am. Holy shit. Mm-hmm. Talk about putting on your big girl panties. Here you go. Mm-hmm. It was one of the most horrifying things that I've ever done. I mean, on every level.
And these were 12-year-olds?
11, 12, 13-year-olds.
Yeah, gosh.
Yeah, no filtration system.
Uh-huh.
And here I am doing it in another language. And this kid says, Miss, we don't really understand your accent. Okay. All right. Well, let me try this one then.
Yeah.
So I did it. And so now I know that there's pretty much nothing that I can't do. But if I would have missed one step along this journey, somewhere, somehow, not all the pieces would have gelled. there would have been one piece left out. And I just feel like because of the path, because of the process.
So no regrets.
Not a one.
In other words. Yeah.
Not a one. No, it takes what it takes. I just know that as long as I continue to move forward, that good things are going to happen for me. But once I stagnate and you start getting in your head, then all the demons come out. And that's just not the way that I want to live anymore.
Has that happened to you over the years? You stagnate or you get complacent with a job, or?
I've not allowed complacency to set in. And that's been, I started swimming at the community college years ago. And there were 3 women there that were doing triathlons. And I thought, well, shit, if they can do it, I can do it. So I started training for the triathlons. And so I did 6 sprint level triathlons.
You did not?
I
really?
did.
Wow.
I finished every one I started.
Amazing.
And then my sister...
Where did you do them?
Here in Santa Fe and Albuquerque.
Okay.
And then my sister started training to run the Nike Women's Marathon. And so I got up to about 13 miles. I was going to do the half marathon, and my knees just wouldn't do it. I just couldn't do it.
So you're the swimmer and the biker.
Yeah, the run was my worst part. So then I started the Santa Fe. I started training for the Santa Fe Century, and the first year
and that's 100
miles
bike race. Yeah.
The first year I did it, I did 50. The second year I did 80. The third year I finished. So I just, it was the same thing when I was on my quest for weight loss. If I started a plateau, I would park my car at the furthest end of the parking lot. And then I'd have to walk a little bit further. And, rather than maybe getting in my car and driving to the store, I'd get my bike and I'd ride to the store. So stagnation, I think, is the enemy to forward progress. And it's not just stagnation physically, it's stagnation emotionally and mentally. And you have to constantly seek.
What do you do mentally and emotionally? Because physically, it's really easy to know what to do, to park farthest, or to, in the parking lot, or to take the stairs rather than the elevator. But what do you do mentally and emotionally to not stagnate there? Like, what kind of choices are you making?
Well, this last year while I was teaching, I had to learn how to read in Spanish. So that employs a whole different side of your brain, and that helped me keep from getting mentally stagnant. Last year I traveled to Italy, and my Italian got better just because I've gone several years in a row. So learning new languages, listening to Spanish language TV, listening to Italian language music or TV, that keeps reading a lot. I love to read.
What kind of books do you read?
Well, right now I'm reading 1491, the year before Columbus arrived, and
before he discovered America.
Yeah, because it was Columbus that discovered it.
Yeah.
The 90 million people that were already here had nothing to say about it. And I'm also reading like a murder mystery by what's his name? I have a whole bunch of his books. I download them on Apple. Anyway.
That's okay. If you remember, I'll put them in the show notes just as a fun thing.
Yeah, but a few years ago, because of my work at the Santa Fe School of Cooking, the publisher for all of the Santa Fe School of Cooking cookbooks was there and approached me later and asked me if I wanted to write a book. I don't know if it'll ever get written or not, but I had a lot of fun doing the research.
Yeah, but it's a new challenge for you.
Yeah. I mean, find something that interests you. For me, it's history. First, it was general history, and then it was more history of the Southwest. And the more I've gotten to know about the history of New Mexico and all of the layers of this history, I've really enjoyed getting to learn about the Manhattan Project, the Buffalo Soldiers, the Chinese that helped build the railroads in the southern part of the state. I mean, there's just so many layers. The Civil War battle that was fought here. That's really began to pique my interest. And then from there, it spokes out to other things. I was just in Wisconsin visiting my grandmother, as I said, and we went to this museum of experimental aircraft. And I thought, well, maybe I'll learn to fly. That would be fun because I get airsick. Well, if I could fly myself, I wouldn't get airsick. So maybe I'll take pilot lessons. But while we were there, they had a mock-up of Fat Man and Little Boy, or Fat Man, which I just got done studying with my class. So I was able to read some more information about Fat Man. So it all ties together. I mean, it's all linked. But I think that the takeaway for me is just don't stop.
I've never been one to think about like milestone birthdays, people 25, 30, 35, 40, and they start to freak out at each of those milestones. And I just turned 50 recently.
Well, you make 50 look great.
Oh, why? Thank you. So relatively recently. And I had about a minute where I thought like, oh, I'm 50. Like, what? Like, am I still relevant? I think that's maybe those are the best words that I could use, like, because there's a lot of young people doing similar things that I'm doing, younger people. I'm still young, but younger people than me. So there was about a minute where I thought that, and then I just thought, screw this. Like, I am going to do something. I'm going to run a marathon, like at 50, right? So I ran my first marathon.
Good for you.
At 50, right? But there was a minute there where, so I can identify with people who are whatever the age, 40, 50, 60, 70, I can understand where they start to question themselves about maybe their relevancy or their ability to retain information. Like you said, you were 35. That's quite young. And you were thinking, oh gosh, now I've got to go kind of teach myself how to retain this information again. But really there is, I'm not quite sure what the answer is, but there's got to be something in there, whether it's a purpose or a why, or a motivation or a pain, or a doctor telling you like you're going to die, if you don't make a change. But it sounds like you have taken that information, that directive or that pain point or whatever you want to call it, and you just like, you are grateful every single day.
I just don't ever want to be that person again.
Isn't that a great feeling though?
Yeah.
That is. I mean, it's like who is that person?
I don't want to know them.
Yeah.
They're best left back there. But, I've always had older friends. Ever since I was younger, I've always had friends that are a couple decades older than me. And because I needed that kind of mentorship around me to kind of show me the way. And there's this woman that I see frequently, and she's probably in her late 60s, I want to say. Gray hair, just striking blue eyes, and she is going on to get her master's degree. I was there when she graduated at the community college. Mm-hmm. She just got her bachelor's, and now she's going on to her master's. You know what? If she can do it, so can I. And, I mean, you're not dead until you're not breathing anymore. Don't bury yourself before you're dead. There's always something to strive for, and yeah, it's scary. Yeah, it's painful. Yeah, it's easier to stay sitting in your chair. But what's your goal? What's your purpose? If I feel like if I don't go to bed every night like exhausted, that I have somehow wasted this day. And when it's my last day, I don't want it to be in a hospital bed hooked up to a machine. I want to be 95 skiing down the mountain and have a heart attack or something. Why the heck not? You get one chance at this. You can get busy living, or you can get busy dying. But there's too much to do and too much to see and too much to know for somebody like me to be sedentary. I just can't do it and don't want to do it.
You were always like that though. There was always that element, but you were just channeling it into unhealthy things in the past. I'm just, I'm talking out loud. I don't know how to instill upon other people, because I think I'm more along those lines. Like, I just want to keep busy, and doing healthy things, because I want to be around for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Not just around, but vibrant and relevant.
Well, true, right.
And there's no reason that you can't be. There's absolutely no reason. If you're physically capable and you're mentally capable and financially able, go.
What do you think it is that prevents people from being vibrant, not just sitting on the couch, and being placated?
Maybe fear.
Do you think it's as complicated as that? Because fear seems complicated to me. It's to me like my first word around it would be lazy.
Yeah, but I think lazy masks a lot of other things. It's easy to call somebody lazy because that's the obvious, but what's the underlying cause? What is it that is more comfortable doing this, even though on some level it's stifling you? Why is this easier than this over here, when this could potentially feel so much better and give you so much more in return? That's how I look at it. And I've known people like that. Fear of success. Fear of success.
Fear of failure.
Fear of failure, for sure.
Feel of looking like a jerk, or
yeah,
I think there's all that. I think a lot of those little things are.
Nobody wants to fail. That's I think that's also universal. Nobody ever wakes up this morning and goes, I'm gonna fail. Mm-hmm. No, that doesn't happen. But I think through a series of lack of action or lack of motivation, are you failing in some level? Yeah, maybe yourself a little bit. Because it's big, it's bold, it's broad, it's vibrant, it's out there. And I think for some people that's just overwhelming. It's noisy. It's messy. Oh my God, I'm going to have to talk to somebody and exchange information. And what if we don't agree? And that's hard. It's hard to put yourself out there. Or, it's hard to put yourself out there.
Just period.
Yeah. Forget, standing in front of a group or public speaking or doing anything big. It's just hard for some people just to face people. And I think that's fear. I would love to climb Mount Kilimanjaro at, what did you say, you're 90?
Yeah. I've got, my friend at 80, she climbed Kilimanjaro. I'm trying to get her on the podcast, but the interesting thing about her is that you can't talk about her age because she doesn't see it as an attribute, or she doesn't see it as anything special. So it would be like me saying to you, "Oh, let's talk about your brown eyes. That's what we want to talk about." It's like, well, there's nothing to talk about.
Yeah, they're mine.
Right, and
they work.
That's what she thinks, is that that's just a part of her, and she's off doing all these crazy things. I can't get her to sit down and
good for her.
Have a podcast with me. Yeah, it is great. And I have and I look up to a lot of people like that who are climbing Kilimanjaro at. Another friend at 74, another friend at 70, and just off doing these crazy things in Nepal. And it's really inspirational for me. And that is a motivator for me. And I try to, when the conversation spirals into, like if I'm with a group of older people and the conversation starts to spiral about doctor's appointments and these issues and that, that kind of thing, then I just think, oh no, I don't want to be part of that conversation. I want to go seek out those people who are doing really cool things because they are an inspiration. And I think the world is changing. What is it? I'm going to switch it around, but like 60 is the new 40 kind of thing, or 40 is the new 60, whatever.
Well, I'm 48 and a half.
Yeah.
So I look at my life. I'm like, okay, if I get to 96, I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm good.
Did you have a 48 and a half birthday cake, or just like to say that?
It's just funny because the kids that I taught, I'm 11 and a half. I'm 12 and a half. I'm 48 and a half.
Yeah.
You look old. Well, thanks.
But that's important. That half year is important to them.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. But, I'm looking at the big birthday, too, and I'm thinking, I'm looking back from here back, and I'm thinking, well, my late 40s have been pretty good because you put down a lot of crapola. It's like the 20s and your 30s, you're just trying to figure out who you are. And then I remember hitting 40 and going, okay, I'm not a kid anymore. I'm like, this is like, I'm really a grown-up now. And now I'm thinking, okay, I'm a grown-up, but I've got a little bit of money. I've got a little bit of education. I've traveled a little bit, and I can now look at the rest of my life as much more of a brightly colored tapestry, because I feel like there's so much more in front of me than there is behind me, because I've been able to put down a lot of that crapola and BS and put it behind you. And put it behind me and make peace with it and move on. And I think that's what this part of your life is about, is making peace with some stuff.
Yeah.
So that you can put it down and finally move on.
Well, the interesting thing for me too about that is when you have a healthier lifestyle, and whether that means you're just eating better and you're more vibrant and you have more energy, or you stop drinking and you stop wasting your time in that area.
Downward spiral.
Right. But and literally the time spent drinking and the time spent recovering from drinking. And it's also the food. It's the time wasted on the couch, with a bag of chips, and then the food hangover the next day because you don't feel great. You don't have that energy. There's a lot of wasted time. And when you start to get healthier, then you start being grateful and appreciating every moment, and then just thinking like, well, that's a waste of time. If I eat a bunch of junk food,
I'm going to feel like garbage.
Yeah. Or a big Kit Kat candy bar, or it's it's wasted time, and life is short.
I have found that the more good you pack into a day, the less negativity you have time for. If I'm eating really, really fresh, and I don't even go to organic, fresh. Just start fresh. I feel one way. If I eat another way, oh God, I just came back from the Midwest. Everything was fried. My last day there, I'm like, I just want some fruit and some oatmeal. I can't eat anything else fried.
And there's a lot of pressure. It's what's wrong with you if you can't if you're not eating like we are.
Well, you can eat that way if you want, but I'm going to eat this way because this is how I want to feel. It's about, ultimately, at the end of the day, how do you want to feel? How do you want to look at this? And I want to look at it. I want to look at it in the most positive light possible.
I do also a culinary tour to New Orleans, and I tell people right on the itinerary, this is not for vegetarians. It's really, and I am.
Right.
But I go and I have a great time because I love New Orleans, and I like to show other people a good time. But it's a weird kind of pressure when everybody else, when all that unhealthiness is around you. There's a even though it's unspoken, there's a little bit of that peer pressure of like, what's wrong with you if you're not, partaking in this? And I'm like, no, I'll just have my salad, really. And it's okay. It really is okay.
But it takes a certain amount of brass to be able to resist the pressure too. But you know that if you do this, you're not going to feel good.
Exactly. And also because I travel so much, I can't concede to, well, it'll just be this one trip, because then 2 weeks later I'm somewhere else, and then it's just that other trip. And I learned that, not too long ago, I just realized that, no, I have to make a complete change with my life and be super healthy all around, because otherwise it's just...
Well, if you make an exception here, then you make an exception there, and pretty soon the exception becomes the rule.
Right, true. So your family is in Minnesota, you said?
Wisconsin.
Oh, Wisconsin. I'm sorry.
Wisconsin, Michigan.
Yep, got it. And healthy lifestyle at all in the family there?
They hunt, they fish, but it's very, very difficult to be outside and moving when it's,
negative 40.
Right. And it's been gray since like November, and it's February. So that would be a really easy place to fall into a lot of bad habits. And, I think people do the best they can with what they can do. But it would not be my style of life.
Did you live up there?
No.
And also it was always
going to
Texas
visit.
And just visiting.
Texas, New Mexico, California.
As you were talking about kind of making this transition and this turn with your life and getting healthier, do you now feel, and just as we talked about, making better choices, do you, and not letting any grass grow under your feet, just like
Certainly.
staying really busy. Do you feel an obligation or a pressure to make everything count and to do a lot of things because you wasted a lot of time? And those are my words, but just because you wasted a lot of time.
Completely. And because I spent so many days and nights just feeling like I never saw the sun, I hate being inside now. I have to be outside, especially if it's a nice day. So I have a horse. I ride my bike. I walk. I'm constantly outside pulling weeds in the garden. I just don't want to be inside. To me, being inside is like sick people. I don't want to be a sick people. I want to be healthy people.
Could you ever live anywhere other than Santa Fe?
No, this is home.
This is what, 350 days a year of sunshine?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, we have 300 something days of sunshine here.
Yeah.
No, this is home. And I don't know that I realized how strong my pull to this area was until a few years ago. I was driving westbound down I-40 near Gallup, and it was around sunset. And the sun was just hitting the red rocks of Gallup, and I thought, you know what, I'm home. This is where I'm supposed to be. And I get that same kind of pull when I go through the Taos Gorge. There's something very magical for me about northern New Mexico, and this is going to be home.
What's your background, your ethnic background?
Mexican-German, which is pretty common in Texas.
And so you've got travel in your future. You talked about Germany. You've been to Italy. What other big travel plans do you have?
Well, a few years ago, I got to go to. Oh, actually, at the end of July, we're the whole family is boarding a plane, and we're going to go up to Lake Shasta up in California.
Beautiful.
I've never been up there.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
But I've been by Shasta Dam, but I've never been by Shasta. So
it has the same kind of woo-woo, like vortex, feeling that Santa Fe does. It's really neat.
I've ended up there. I'm going to end up there for a week. And then I did some consulting work in Sedona that has that same kind of woo, whatever. One of my favorite cities in California is Berkeley and, like San Luis Obispo. So
you don't strike me as a woo-woo person.
I'm not, but it's strange that I keep ending up in these places. No, I'm not.
Well, they're highly spiritual, whether you buy into some of that other stuff. And you talked about Santa Fe being a really magical place that kind of draws people in. So I can see.
I certainly follow spiritual practice. And whether it's being with animals or outside, that's where I find spirituality here. I remember I was skiing a few years ago at Ski Santa Fe, and I was coming down through some trees, and the snow was really light. Like you couldn't even make a fist with it. And as I looked back up through the trees, the sun was coming in, and the snow was kind of glinting up, and I'm like, oh, God, this is just like a cathedral. I mean, that's to me where I find spirituality. I'm not much of a religious person. That's just not my calling. But I find that with spending time with animals and with plants and growing a garden, that's really where I find my religious practice. If I have one at all, I guess that's where I would find it.
Do you quote unquote get along better with animals and nature than you do with people? Really?
Oh, completely. Yeah. I would much rather spend a day with a horse or the dog, or I actually have a goat too, and the chickens. And yeah.
So how do you bring your, as I called it earlier, your light and your enthusiasm and your big love of life into a room of people and affect them so much when you'd be just as happy out with your horse?
You know, I want people to at least leave Santa Fe. And I mean, I'm speaking about being at the cooking school because that's where I encounter big groups of people. I want them to leave Santa Fe with an understanding of why this place is so special. And you know, I want them, if it's at a party or something, if I feel like I can bring a laugh to somebody or say something that they find funny, well, that's kind of my job as a human. So it's I don't know. I do like people. They're okay. You know, I have to interact. I'm all right with that. But sometimes it takes, especially being a teacher, it takes a lot out of you. I mean, every single one of those 93 kids took a little something every day. And I would go home and just exhausted. But the last day of school was hard. Saying goodbye to the ones that were there was really hard. Harder than I thought it would be.
Because they ended up tugging on your heartstrings.
Yeah. Yeah, they some of them wrote me letters, and I couldn't read them for a couple days. I was like...
Meanwhile, the other however many days you were in school with them, you're like, oh, what are you doing? You're
I could totally understand how teachers break out the duct tape. I didn't. I wouldn't. But oof.
Do they really? Teachers?
Oh, yeah. There was a teacher that was fired in Albuquerque for duct taping a student into his chair.
Oh, I thought over the mouth or something.
No, he duct taped him into his chair.
I could see that.
Yeah, totally.
I could understand that. So you don't know quite what is next. So you're doing your cooking classes. Mm-hmm. You're doing events through your catering service, and but you're looking for something a little bit more stable, or you need something a little bit more stable, which is totally understandable.
Yeah, I need to think about the grown-up things like benefits and retirement, because ultimately, you know, I may retire, I may not. I don't know yet.
Well, if you it's in your genes. If you're living well into your 90s, hopefully you will have some retirement in you. You won't, at least to travel in your 90s. Or
three of my four grandparents lived into their 90s. So yes, I need to make sure I have some retirement set aside. But one of the things that I'm looking forward to is my wife Leslie and I, we're partners in our catering company, have been looking at kitchen space. And we may be able to start to get our own kitchen here pretty soon. She's a baker. She's an amazing bread baker. So she'll focus on, baking bread wholesale and retail. And then we'll have a catering kitchen where we can begin expanding our business.
That sounds like a great plan.
So that's where we both want to end up ultimately. In our Leslie's oldest daughter, my stepdaughter, is the pastry chef at Restaurant Martine. The 14-year-old and the 10-year-old also have an interest in cooking. So we could
just make it a big family affair.
And that way we have something to leave to them. You know, they have something that they can work towards if they choose. If they choose not to, they don't have to, certainly. I mean, it's their life, live it. But this could be something viable for them to take over someday. So, you know, like what happened at the cooking school, Susan is backing off. Susan Curtis, the founder, she's backing off. Nicole is increasing her role.
Daughter.
And then Haley's coming in and she's helping. So it truly is a family operation, and you can tell. In all the right ways, you can tell.
Yeah, there's a lot of love in it,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
A lot of attention.
Yeah, and you only get that when it's yours, as you know. Because you drop a detail and something doesn't get done. There is no somebody else, it's you. And you can't drop details.
That's a great plan. I like that. idea.
So perhaps your next visit back to Santa Fe.
I'm already thinking. I'm quiet because I've got all these ideas. I'm like, oh yeah, like I could totally see you with your own inn, or just a whole big operation for you guys.
Well, we're motivated, and working with your partner has its advantages and disadvantages, but we know what we can expect out of each other. And if I don't do it, she does it. If she doesn't do it, I do it.
Right. And you have different skills and interests. It sounds like.
Yeah, she's constantly thinking about baking, and I'm constantly thinking about history.
Yeah. History of food.
Right.
Not history teaching to the 7th graders.
Well, it's all history of food. And ultimately, I would like to develop a school curriculum using math, science, history, all around food. You can teach so many things, and you can teach so many things because it's all of the learning is applied right away. You can teach decimals, you can teach algebra, you can teach physics, you can teach chemistry. There's nothing that isn't touched by food in some way. And so that for me is why food is history, history is food, and it all spokes right back to right now, right here.
What, just out of curiosity, what are your daily habits? You get up in the morning, you said you walk around your garden, you have a cup of coffee. Is that kind of your wake up? What time do you get up in the morning?
Well, right now, because it's summer, 7:30, make coffee, wander around, feed the dogs, chase the cats.
And the goat.
Well, the goat is actually boarded with the horse that I board separately. But eventually we'll have our own little ranch, and the goat and the horse will come home. And then I want a bunch of goats.
And then you start your day. You get going. Mm-hmm. Start training for your next triathlon.
Yeah, married with children there's some things that have dropped off, and the triathlon training has dropped off.
Yeah,
different priorities now.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah. And it sounds like the kids are interested in life, and interesting kids too. So
they are very much so. I'm very, very fortunate.
Anything we didn't cover today that you want to?
I think we talked about pretty much life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah, and the pursuit of baked goods and tamales, at least.
Right,
yeah,
absolutely.
That's all good. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Beth.
It's great to get to know you better and share a little conversation. And I look forward to coming back. I love it in Santa Fe. I do love it. I don't know that I don't know that I'd want to live here. I don't know that it's that for me, but I do really, really love it, and I hope to come down here more often. So hopefully I'll see you at your next adventure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever that is. Yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
She is pretty cool, isn't she? Again, I urge you to join one of her cooking classes at the Santa Fe School of Cooking. So really, whether you like to cook or not, she's going to make the class a total hoot. You're just going to have a great time. A reminder that if you like what you hear, please subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play and leave a review. Those reviews really do help the podcast get more exposure and will ultimately help us grow our Be Bold community. I bet you know a few people in your world who would also enjoy today's episode and this podcast in general, so please do share. Podcasts are a new thing for some people, so if you've got a friend who doesn't know how to download them, take a moment to give them a lesson. I'm working on launching a website dedicated to the podcast, but in the meantime, you can find out more about me by visiting wanderlustandlipstick.com as well as wandertours.com. And that's where you'll see the tours I lead around the world, as well as our culinary tours to Santa Fe, New Orleans, and Seattle. It's worth mentioning that soon you'll be able to purchase Be Bold gear and accessories. I encourage you to check out the Wonder World Foundation, the nonprofit I founded to help women and children in developing countries. I'll put links to all those sites in the show notes, and that's on the Wanderlust and Lipstick site, wanderlustandlipstick.com/podcast. Sign up for my newsletter on the Wanderlust and Lipstick site, and you'll receive a series of tips on how to make your travels more bold and safer. And you can friend me on Facebook, and I'm WanderGal on Instagram. If you know of any high-performing, adventurous, philanthropic women whom you think might be a good guest, shoot me a note or leave a comment. And finally, the ladies can join us on our Be Bold Facebook group. That's where you'll find our growing community. It's where we share goals, talk about our setbacks, and where you can find words of encouragement and inspiration from others. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Be Bold podcast. Until next time, be bold.